It's Kelly Clarkson here to talk all things Wayfair, the best place to buy furniture, decor, and anything else you can think of to create a home you absolutely love. Some of y'all might have heard I made the cross-country move from LA to New York last year, and Wayfair has definitely helped me create the feeling of home wherever I am. I love a cozy couch and a comfy living room that feels like our little sanctuary for our family. And I love vases, I love candles, I love anything that kind of makes you feel at home and peaceful. Anyway, something about me is I love options when it comes to making my home more me. I know when I shop with Wayfair, I find options for every style, whether I'm feeling boho or farmhouse, modern, traditional, French country. I can find exactly what I need for my home and more. Everyone loves a good deal. I mean, who does not want free and fast and easy delivery? Come on. No matter your space, style, or budget, shop Wayfair.com to make your home way more you.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
89% of business leaders say AI is a top priority. But with AI tools popping up everywhere, how do you separate the helpful from the hype? The right choice is crucial, which is why teams at 1/3 of Fortune 500 companies use Grammarly. With over 15 years of experience building responsible, secure AI, Grammarly isn't just another AI communication assistant. It's how companies like yours increase productivity while keeping data protected and private. Designed to fit the needs of business, Grammarly is backed by a user-first privacy policy and industry-leading security credentials. This means you won't have to worry about the safety of your company information. Grammarly also emphasizes responsible AI, so your company can avoid harmful bias. See why 70,000 teams and 30 million people trust Grammarly at Grammarly.com/enterprise. That's Grammarly.com/enterprise. Grammarly, enterprise-ready AI.
Work takes up most of your time. That's why you should use Stamps.com to save time with your mailing and shipping, and have flexibility to focus on more important things. Stamps.com can handle all your mailing and shipping needs with rates up to 88% off USPS and UPS. Add flexibility to your day with Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com/program to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/program.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Okay, really excited about today's show. We have Dave Emory's come back to the show, the legendary Dave Emory. You can find him at spitfirelist.com. That's his website where he does all his writing. And is a prolific producer of content. His Patreon is Dave Emory on Patreon, and the podcast you could find at WFMU-FM, and that's where you can find his weekly podcast. Mr. Dave Emory, are you there?
I am here.
Thank you so much, man. Okay.
I was very slightly and pleasantly embarrassed by referring to me as legendary. It's very kind of you, but you know, the older I get, the more I'm starting to wonder. Maybe I don't really exist. Maybe I am just a legend.
Yeah, someone's doing an impersonation of Dave Emory. We hired an actor.
That's it. Maybe I'm really just a bot. You know, maybe this is all some giant manifestation of an advanced civilization's high-tech prank.
well, the artificial intelligence, and it's right around the corner. They will have a fake Dave Emory. I want to just say one thing to the audience, too. Though. Dave Emory is just not a legend in this field of parapolitics and conspiracy and stuff like that. The man is a true gentleman, okay? And really was very, very kind to me. And I can't thank you enough, Mr. Emory, for coming back on the show.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and you deserve any kindness that is directed toward you, because these days, I think anyone who is honest, anyone who is brave enough to be honest, and they're related but separate, and anyone who is willing to, this is a horrible cliche, but speak truth to power, should be not only recognized, not only supported, but frankly honored with a capital H. So It is in that context that I view and interact with you. So it is both a pleasure and an honor to be back.
Well, thank you. And, my feelings are the exact same way for you, sir. Can you remind the audience, though, if they've been living under a rock for the past 40 years, who is Dave Emory?
Well, I refer to myself as an anti-fascist. That maybe, Americans these days, something like 54% of the American people read at a 5th grade level or lower. I thought it was 6th grade, but someone whose judgment I respect said it's actually 5th grade. 1 in 8 is illiterate. So when you talk to the average American these days about being an anti-fascist, they're likely to say, if you use the term anti-fascist, well, I didn't know her personally, but I hear she was quite a gal. Say, wasn't she related to Pearl Harbor? And that is basically how I refer to myself. This actually, the passing and humorous reference to Pearl Harbor is relevant here because the study of fascism is the study of great power, great economic power, and the derivative great intellectual power, because in the old cliche of golden rule, he who has gold rules, and that's also referential here. If you have a great deal of money, you have a great deal of power, and you get to do things like buy the Washington Post, as Jeff Bezos did, or buy Twitter, now X, as Elon Musk did. And
let me ask you this, because you mentioned anti-fascism, okay? I myself am anti-fascist. What do you make of these youngsters out here with these podcasts? They're trying to cover the same topics that we've covered, conspiracy. Today we're going to be talking about the John Lennon assassination and Yoko Ono and her background. What do you make of these youngsters out there that are so enamored with Trump and the right wing and the woke, anti-woke and all this stuff?
Well, I think that it's a combination of several things. One of the things, very long story made very short, fascism manifests itself through political assassination. In Germany, before Hitler rose, and Hitler was not a nut, he was an undercover agent for the German army between the wars, the Reichswehr, the political department of the Reichswehr. But his road to power was paved with a series of political assassinations, ranging from doctrinaire communists like Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, or doctrinaire Marxists, to conservative social democrats like Walter von Rathenau. And they were systematically killed by the Black Reichswehr underground units of the German army. In Japan, the road to power for the fascists was also paved by a wave of assassinations. Perhaps the most significant was what is called the May 15th incident. That was May 15th, 1932, when Prime Minister Kai Inu-kai was assassinated by a group of naval cadets from the Native Land-Loving School in Japan. In Italy, likewise, perhaps the second only to the March on Rome. But Mussolini's ascent was facilitated by the assassination of Giacomo Matteotti, a key member of the Italian parliament who was fiercely and outspokenly critical of Mussolini, and Mussolini had him killed. So when one hears conspiracy theory, unquote, it is actually a CIA-enhanced term that, in my opinion, covers up one of the most fundamental aspects of fascism. Now, when you get to the point that we have arrived at, and when that history has systematically been, if not completely obscured, badly polluted, and when at the same time people who are just folks, to coin a term, when they have been economically subjugated to one extent or another, when they are not getting good education. And again, as I mentioned, 54% of the American people read at a fifth grade lower or level. 1 in 8 is illiterate. And then when you consider, well, what do they read? I mean, you get the people who are going to college and they're reading puff piece biographies of Henry Kissinger written by a journalist who works for the Washington Post, long a CIA asset, now owned by Jeff Bezos. They are, to an extent, a product of their environment. They have been misinformed, and at the same time, they have been, I don't like the word oppressed, Ed, because it's almost cliched at this point in time, but they have been certainly pressed from an economic standpoint. And I think that a major factor driving Donald Trump is the very superficiality of his lies. I mean, he says he's going to bring jobs back to America. Well, that's great. We hear all about China. In fact, China is that's a whole other subject, but it is doing remarkably well, and it is not quote, communist, unquote. It does have a large communist party, but in 1981, China did a remarkable pivot, and while keeping the chassis, so to speak, of its political system intact. In 1981, 88% of the Chinese people lived at or below the poverty level. By 2020, that was down to 56 million. It was down to 0.1%, some remarkably low thing. And China now is they graduate more engineers every year than the rest of the world combined, so they're doing quite well. They also have more billionaires than any other country on earth, so they certainly have private enterprise, but it's reined in. But yet, people, going back to your original question, people are not being told things like that. China, for example, right now leads in green power every week, and this comes from ABC Australia, hardly a pro-Chinese source. Every week, Ed, they are adding the equivalent every week, the equivalent of 5 new large nuclear power plants, except powered with green energy, mostly solar, also others. And yet people aren't being told that. They are being told that the reason they're not getting good jobs is because all the good jobs, unquote, have gone to China. And as the wage scale in China and the standard of living has risen, and it has very appreciably, very, very greatly done that, these same corporations that were relegating some of their manufacturing functions to China are doing it to other developing nations. Those jobs aren't coming back here. Suppose Trump does what he says he's going to do and levies all kinds of tariffs on goods coming into this country. Well, that is going to lead to inflation.
Exactly. I've been saying that for years. Tariffs cause inflation.
Well, they do, and the people who are running those corporations are going to pass that along to the consumer. The countries in which the countries whose goods are being tariffed, so to speak, to turn that into a verb, are going to retaliate, and they're going to levy tariffs on our goods. And for people who don't have much money, and that certainly includes me, that is going to be a dire consideration. And plus, I'm an old geezer, Ed, and I need Social Security and Medicare that I've worked for my entire life. The Republicans are going to target those. But, you know, when young people see trouble, when they hear him, and I have to be careful because I know now very happily your program is aired on some radio stations. You know, when Trump talks about reaching out and grabbing a woman by the P word, or when he has some of the grotesque comments he's been making about quote, immigrants, unquote, and race and so forth, it might be considered, and I'm going to coin a term here, barstool fascism. It's people who are recognizing in the language Trump uses. If you actually study Trump, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and I understand that he has a solid gold toilet in his home. So he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and a gold toilet adorning his buns, and he is the antithesis of working class or lower middle class, and he has throughout his life expressed more or less open contempt for the same kinds of people who are supporting him today. But I think one of the things that is propelling him is that people are, if not desperate, they are certainly hurting. And they see in Trump someone who provides easy and simple solutions to complex problems, and they haven't been educated about those problems. The average American at this point knows as much about economics as he or she does about high-energy physics. And the same could be said of Trump. And at the same time, when you hear Trump, talking about, well, we're going to, get those black people, those immigrants or whatever.
They're eating the cats.
It's a very long story, very short. The meme that Trump used in his debate about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, eating people's cats and dogs comes from a Nazi group called Blood Tribe, headed by Christopher Polhaus, which in turn was networking with the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. And so it comes straight from the Nazis. There was a full-page op-ed piece in the New York Times by Governor Mike DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio, who said it was a lie. The Republican mayor of Springfield, Ohio, said it was a lie. And yet Springfield, Ohio has been beset with bomb threats. Their schools have closed. They have to have security guards there. Likewise, when Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I won't characterize her in any fashion because this definitely would run you afoul of the FCC, and this is a nod to the radio stations that carry your program. When she sends out tweets about the hurricane, was it Helene, being manipulated to do this and that, and for the record, so to speak, that's the name of my weekly program, environmental modification for the purposes of warfare, including not only weather modification, but manipulating earthquakes, which Nikola Tesla could do at the beginning of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, and other things. The U.S. and the former Soviet Union had a treaty about that on the books by 1977. It was almost a half century ago. And so certainly those things are a matter of record, but yet global warming greatly exacerbates the power and velocity of hurricanes. And yet meteorologists, people with FEMA, they're being putting up with death threats, armed people showing up, and we've gotten to the point. There was an article that was derivative of a Pew Foundation research. They did a poll, and the Pew Foundation is hardly a leftist organization. The Pew family were involved. They were the dominant family with the Sun Oil Company, or Sunoco. I'm sure you probably remember when you were a youngster.
I do remember Sunoco, yeah.
And they're a very reactionary family. To give you a cue, their top political guru, so to speak, was a guy named Hans Sennholz, with two N's. He was a former Luftwaffe interrogator. I mean, interrogator is a wonderful euphemism, like interrogation. It basically means torture. It's a horrible thing. But they found that young people and Republicans, which is an interesting grouping, they view social media as just as credible as regular media. So we've got young people to an extent who just haven't been educated, and they're hearing from social media and from Donald Trump what they want to hear. They're hearing easy solutions to complex problems. And then at the same time, the people who...
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Who are, working class, lower middle class, and who are relatively uneducated. That's not meant to be condescending. They see in Trump the same kind of person they recognize as being on the bar stool next to them at the local bar. And they say, yeah, I'm going to vote for him because, I want to reach out and grab a woman by the P word myself. And, I want to do something about all those N words and all those immigrants and all that stuff. And there's a very good, very short book that was published years ago, and it's called The Making of Donald Trump by David K. Johnston. It's only 234 pages. Donald Trump has throughout his life demonstrated, I wouldn't say it was thinly veiled because it isn't veiled at all, open contempt, both in word and deed, for working class people, for the very kind of people whose support he has been able to garner to a large extent. He has always screwed working people. He has always screwed those people, and it's quite remarkable.
By the way, we've had David K. Johnson on the show a couple of times. Great work coming from David K. Johnson. But the thing is, if you check out SpitfireList.com and the Dave Emory Patreon, this is the kind of research, this is the kind of stuff you're going to be getting, man. This is gold, the stuff that this guy can just rattle off the top of his head. You're not going to find this out there all over the place. But the thing is, Dave, we're starting to run out of time, and I want to pick your brain about Yoko Ono and the assassination of John Lennon. Well, what do you have for us?
Well, I've done a program about that, and I've also put an article up on my Patreon site. Excuse me. I should say about John Lennon. I wasn't a big fan of his. I liked the early Beatles. I liked a lot of his early music. I was not a big fan of his latter material or the Beatles' latter work as well, including the things he did when he was hooked up with Yoko Ono. Right. But he meant a great deal to a great many people. And his murder very definitely, it not only removed from the scene one of the relatively few people who was capable of galvanizing large numbers of people toward progressive causes. For example, hypothetically speaking, the bloodbath that was launched in Central America, well, not launched, but perpetuated and accelerated by Ronald Reagan. And really, I think when you talk about Ronald Reagan, you have to talk about George H.W. Bush, the man for whom CIA headquarters is named, and who was Ronald Reagan's vice president. Lennon was one of the few people who could have mobilized people in support of that. He had a history of political activism, of opposing the Vietnam War. He also financed the publication with the realist, not a publication I think a whole lot of, but the late Paul Krasner of the realist was, in my opinion, and it's my opinion, the classic broken clock that's right twice a day. And most of the time he would call the wrong time. But he published 3 articles by my late dear friend Mae Russell that were really seminal, one of which her long book-length article about the Symbionese Liberation Army was the focal point of a 5-hour broadcast I did in the summer of September of 1986. But John Lennon was someone who was politically active, and the Beatles, with their extremely high profile with a capital E, capital H, and capital P situation, were capable of marshaling large numbers of people toward the political cause. His assassination, and we should remember he didn't just die, I mean, he was murdered, he was shot to death, was a political assassination. To make a very long story very short, Mark David Chapman, who, in my opinion, was the MK Ultra / mind control patsy for the assassination of John Lennon, was not the actual assassin of John Lennon. The bullets, I believe, came in from John Lennon's left. I may have this turned around. He was either standing to Lennon's left, and the bullets came from Lennon's right, or the other way around. But in any event, Mark David Chapman could not have been the man who pulled the trigger on the bullets that killed John Lennon, but rather a guy who was serving as the doorman that evening at the Dakota Hotel, who was a fellow named Major, his last name was Perdomo, and I'm going to get you his full name here in just a second.
It's Jose Perdomo.
Jose Perdomo. He was not only an anti-Castro Cuban, he had worked for the CIA. He was at one point, I think it was in the middle of Sangenis, Sangenis. He was a CIA officer. He was a veteran of Operation 40, the anti-Castro Cuban paramilitary operations. He was linked with Frank Sturgis. He was part of the corrupting a title from both the late Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty's book, also used by the Christic Institute in their lawsuit against some of the players in the Iran-Contra scandal. The secret team, I would call it the not-so-secret team, because they're not really a secret. They are not hidden, but they have been eclipsed. It was Major Perdomo who was identified by a witness as having actually fired the shots, and he was engaging Mark David Chapman in conversation about not only the Bay of Pigs, but about drumroll fanfare, the assassination of President Kennedy for hours prior to John Lennon and Yoko's arrival. Lennon was, again, killed with 4 shots that came in from the opposite side of the body that John Lennon, that Mark David Chapman was standing on, and he also basically, I'm just doing a little, doing a little Googling around with this. Anyway, Major Perdomo, the handyman turned doorman for that evening, disposed of the weapon. One eyewitness said that it was actually Perdomo who did the shooting. Mark David Chapman had plenty of time to get away. He did not get away, and one of the psychiatrists, by the way, who helped to treat him, Dr. Bernard Diamond, had also treated Saran, who was in all probability a mind control patsy for the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And that's Robert F. Kennedy Sr., not to be confused with, pardon my French, brainworm Bobby, who just, I mean, again, I have to be careful what I say about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because your program is aired on the radio, and boy, if I were to be absolutely candid, I would have to reach into the foulest backwaters of my vocabulary. And, I like you, Ed, although my parents were from the Midwest, I'm a native of New York City, and New York City has its own dictionary. It begins with M and ends with F, so I have to watch out for that. But the point being that John Lennon was not killed by Mark David Chapman. He was killed by someone else who was doing the shooting, probably Major Perdomo, and that was his actual title. But in any event, Perdomo then took the gun, which was never tested for ballistics, and I don't know what ultimately happened to the weapon, but Yoko Ono had John Lennon's body cremated 36 hours after the killing. That precluded any serious forensic investigation of the cadaver. And again, with the shots having come from the opposite side,
Dave, about the shots, I had a guest on the show a couple of times, Ron Farrell, who did some YouTube documentaries about this 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And he actually counted every single bullet hole, and he says, Ed, there's more bullet holes than would fit bullets in that gun. The gun only carried 6 bullets, and there's like 8 holes in doors and windows and jackets and all over the place.
I'm not familiar with that, and I'm not in any way casting aspersions on what your guest said, but I try to be very careful in this regard, simply because I have not seen the documentation upon which his allegations were made. So I'm going to keep my footing on firm territory here. The bullets came from Lennon's left side, but Yoko Ono had Lennon's body cremated 36 hours after the killing. That precluded any serious investigation of John Lennon's killing. Now, Yoko Ono herself was a very interesting individual. She was the step-granddaughter. Now, one of the things, Ed, about quote, conspiracy theory, unquote, and this indirectly goes back to your question/observation about the young people who are all enthralled with Trump today, and I think they are enthralled with him because of a combination of social and economic distress and sincere ignorance. They just have not been informed of what's really going on. But to understand the world today, you have to understand corporate power and economic power. I'm going to toss out something very quickly. In years ago, I used to do a 3-hour phone-in talk show on Sunday nights, and during a musical break, someone called me up and asked me. They said to me, here's a concept. When I think it was Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Rail, when the first lawsuit that established corporations as separate entities was completed, did we actually create a new life form? Now, that's counterintuitive. People think, well, of course not. We created corporations, but yet we consider viruses to be a life form. They don't have a brain. They don't have a nervous system. All they have is a protein sheath and nucleic material, DNA in the case of regular viruses, RNA in the case of retroviruses, but they certainly have chi or life force. When you think about corporations, they have completely perverted, I would say, just about every aspect of our lives. They are the reason why we have wars. They're the reason the environment is going to the blazes. They completely alter our social and political routines. We do what we do, when we do, why we do it, because of the corporations. And the more time has passed, as counterintuitive as it is, I think, sadly, and this is something I say with great regret, but I think the answer is yes, and it's a horrible thing to contemplate. But to understand the world in which we live, you've got to understand those corporations. And in the case of Yoko Ono, she is the step-granddaughter of the founder of the Yasuda Trust. That is one of the so-called Zaibatsu. That's spelled Z-A-I-B-A-T-S-U. These are the gigantic family trusts that are that dominate Japan, and which in turn were behind the rise of fascism in Japan, and which in turn also had not only heavily networked with American corporations, but in the immediate aftermath of World War II, they were resuscitated and put back into power precisely to not only maintain the political and economic status quo, but to set the stage for anti-communism, for the Cold War. We did the same thing in Germany. We took the same corporations and financial institutions that had financed Hitler and that networked very heavily with our own oligarchs, I will say. And we put them back in power, and we incorporated the entirety of the Third Reich's national security establishment, the Reinhard-Gehlen spy outfit, which William Corson, a Marine Corps colonel who resigned his commission in protest over the Vietnam War, became the special advisor to the Troops Committee, wrote a book called The Armies of Ignorance, and when interviewed by the late brilliant Carl Oglesby, he characterized the Gehlen organization as, quote, a front for Odessa Nazis. And by Odessa, he meant that the post-World War II SS fraternal organ, or SS underground organization. The German general staff surrendered. Neither the Nazi Party nor the SS surrendered at the end of World War II. We not only took in the Gehlen Org, which is our eyes and ears on the former Soviet Union during the Cold War, but we also took in the Project Paperclip scientists. Most notably, perhaps the most famous of those was Werner von Braun, who was the director of our space program. He wasn't an apolitical technocrat, as he has been represented as being. He was an officer in the SS, and he and Walter Dornberger, the military commander at Peenemünde and Nordhausen, signed contracts and to work for General Electric's missile program, their equivalent of the V-2 rocket, in December of 1944. And we took in there the guy who developed Agent Orange, which I know is an older guy, and you remember that. That's what one of the things that devastated the Vietnam veterans. That was a guy named Friedrich, quote, Fritz, unquote, Hoffman, who was the CIA's top poison expert and who was a Project Paperclip scientist brought in from Nazi Germany. We did the same thing in Japan. We put the Zaibatsu right back in power. General MacArthur and his top intelligence officer, Charles Willoughby, a.k.a. Karl Abel von Scheppel of Wiedenbach, a German-born fascist who was an admirer of Mussolini, and Francisco Franco, the fascist dictator of Spain, into whose employ Willoughby went in 1954 after his formal retirement from the military. But we did the same thing in Japan. We put the Zaibatsu back in power. We incorporated their national security establishment, General Seizu Arisu, whom I call the Japanese Gehlen, Colonel Tsuji Masanobu, who oversaw the Bataan Death March. He killed and cannibalized. He left the Hannibal Lecter of the Bataan Death March. He ate some of the bodies of some of the American POWs he killed. We put these people right back in power and utilized them to fight the Cold War. One of the Zaibatsu that we put right back in power was the Yasuda Trust. And the family of Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono is, again, the step-grandfather of the Yasuda Trust. And she was reading from a book called let's see, was this, by the way, there were people who want to know about Asia, want to wind up in the opposite camp from those misguided, I should say, followers of Donald Trump. You know, as you mentioned it, there was an observation that was made by Dr. Johnson centuries ago, which I think characterizes Team Trump, to coin the term, and I think accurately identifies the deadly nature of what they do, and yet views that with the measure of understanding and consequent compassion that I think is wanted. Dr. Johnson observed the quote, "Those who make beasts of themselves escape the pain of being human." And people who would like to learn more about not only Donald Trump, but why we're in the position we're in, 4 wonderful books about Asia. One, The Song Dynasty, Slong, by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave. A follow-up book called The Marcos Dynasty by the same. The Yamato Dynasty about Japan. And perhaps most importantly, Gold Warriors by those same people. Talks about the Zaibatsu. It talks about how they were put right back in power. And in Gold Warriors, as the late brilliant Iris Chang, who I suspect was murdered, she supposedly committed suicide. I don't buy that at all. But the Japanese systematically looted Asia, Korea in particular, but also China. They had been looting Korea for centuries. They looted all of occupied Asia during World War II, and they brought the loot, gold primarily, but also precious metal, precious gems and things, back to the Japanese home islands. When the American submarine blockade became more effective in late 1943, they began secreting the wealth in elaborately built tunnels all over occupied Asia, but in the Philippines in particular. The Japanese are a mining people. Coal mining is a huge factor in the Japanese economy. And in World War II, American GIs and Marines came face to face or hand to hand with that in the battles of both Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where the Japanese well-honed and long-term honed and skilled mining capabilities led to their underground fortifications. But they built an elaborate series of tunnels all over occupied Asia, the Philippines in particular. And the amount of wealth that they secreted there is unimaginable. One Japanese official said that they had secreted $1 billion in gold in the Philippines. That was in 1945 dollars, Ed, when gold was worth $35 an ounce. It's worth up to maybe $2,000 an ounce now. It is an unimaginable amount of wealth. One tunnel in one complex just in the Philippines, and they had these all over Asia. They got a lot of the wealth back to the home islands. But one tunnel, they had 25 army trucks filled with gold bars. They had 2 55-gallon drums filled with precious gems. And they had 3 large solid gold statues of Buddha. I think one was 3, one was either 6 or 8, and one was either 8 or 12. I think 12. The latter Buddha, and this is solid gold, the latter Buddha statue was so heavy that the Japanese had to use a push-pull combination of bulldozers to get it into the tunnel. Obviously, the bulldozer that was pulling could not be brought back out, so they took out the engine and replaced it with more boxes of gold bars, and then they drained all the diesel from the fuel tank and filled it with precious gems. That's just in one tunnel. The Japanese official who spoke of $1 billion being secreted in the Philippines said it would take them 100 years to dig it out. In Gold Warriors, the Seagraves point out that gold is one of the foundational elements, perhaps the foundational element of not only the post-World War II corporate economy, but also has been used by the U.S. to not only finance covert operations, but to buy political officials around the world, including Japan and the U.S. But to make a very long story very short, that gold is one of the foundational elements of the wealth of the Liberal Democratic Party, which is neither liberal in our political sense of the word, nor democratic. And so Yoko Ono herself is the step-granddaughter of the Yasuda Zaibatsu. Hang on one second. I'm going to zoom up, and that quote was from the Yamato Dynasty by the Seagraves. And speaking of the Zaibatsu, they write, each Zaibatsu was a self-contained commercial empire with its own mines, workers, factories, banks, insurance companies, ocean fleets, and export agencies. They were modeled on the long-established Mitsui family commercial empire. These four new Zaibatsu, that's new as of 1860s, were Mitsubishi, remember that one, Sumitomo, Yasuda, and Iwasaki. And again, Zenhiro Yasuda Zaburo was the adopted son of the maternal grandfather of Yoko Ono. And Yoko Ono's father, Aisuke or Yosugi, depending on the translation, worked as a paymaster for a very important Japanese spy in World War II. He was a British naval aircraft veteran named Frederick Rutland, R-U-T-L-A-N-D. His nickname was Rutland of Jutland, the famous naval battle in World War I. He became the first man ever to fly an airplane from the deck of a ship. Actually, it was from the top of a turret of a battle cruiser. And in the early 1920s, he was employed by the Mitsubishi Corporation to not only train pilots to fly off of ships, but also to handle various types of naval aircraft for Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi manufactured the famous Zero fighter plane, which figured in the attack on Pearl Harbor. And writing in the book Gold Warriors, the Seagraves described Mitsubishi as follows. Mitsubishi's market position at the wars in World War II in 1945 was described by a Western economist as being equivalent to the merger of U.S. Steel, General Motors, Standard Oil, Alcoa, Douglas Aircraft, DuPont, Westinghouse, AT&T, National City Bank, Woolworth Stores, and Hilton Hotels. And that is, as that old Alka-Seltzer ad used to say, that's a some spicy meatball. And that is who both Frederick Rutland and Isuke Ono were working for. And Isuke Ono was the paymaster. He was the Japanese naval intelligence paymaster for a key Japanese spy working for the Mitsubishi Zaibatsu in 1933 in San Francisco, USA. He was a very important, not only banker, but working for Japanese naval intelligence. He was involved with the preparations for Pearl Harbor. One key analyst views him views the Rutland Isuke Ono collaboration as fundamental to the Japanese success in attacking Pearl Harbor. But Yoko Ono then Isuke Ono then became a very important operative for the international banking system in post-World War II global corporatism. He became the top official for what became known as the Bank of Tokyo. The Bank of Tokyo was the renaming of the Yokohama Specie Bank. That was the primary bank. It was 25% owned by Emperor Hirohito. That, by the way, is the correct pronunciation of the Japanese emperor's name. It's spelled Hirohito, Hirohito. It's pronounced Hirohito. It was 25% owned by Emperor Hirohito. It was the primary bank for secreting abroad the massive amount of gold that was looted by the Japanese in World War II. And Yoko Ono's father, Isuke Ono, was the top official. He was the president of the New York branch of the Bank of Tokyo, which was a renaming of the Yokohama Specie Bank. Now, in the book Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile, Paul Manning describes the Yokohama Specie Bank as follows. The family owned a 25% controlling interest, and therefore it was the major instrument in the bank, and therefore it was a major instrument used in the movement of large currency credits and other liquid assets to Switzerland, where Yokohama Specie Bank had a branch and correspondent relations with Swiss and German banks. Once Lord Privy Seal Koichi Kido had dispatched a Japanese Imperial courier plane with a fighter escort to Hong Kong and Macau and other sites with Imperial Kilo bars, they quickly became a deposit credit in the Swiss Receiver Bank. By the end of the war, the deposits on hand were astronomical, and during the post-war rehabilitation of Japan, the imperial fortune kept increasing from the interest charges to various zaibatsu companies. I think the emperor got something like either $1 billion or $3 billion in interest charges on that from the what was called the Showa Trust, Showa, in the Sanwa Bank in Japan, and that was in 1950s dollars, an astronomical. So it wasn't a bad jump of change today, but astronomical. Now, forgive me for reading excerpts here and perhaps getting a little choppy. What does this have to do with Yoko Ono? And what does this have to do with her father and the assassination of John Lennon? Asuki Ono was then invited by the Schroeder Bank, one of the top banks involved with the machinations by which corporate America helped to finance and cooperate with their counterparts in Germany. That was the Schroeder Bank, and it also was heavily involved with Japan as well. And they invited Yasuki Ono to the city of London in Great Britain, and he became the first prominent Japanese banker to operate there. He also paved the way for the opening of branches of, among others, the Sanwa Bank in Great Britain. This places Yasuki Ono, again, the Japanese naval intelligence paymaster for Frederick Rutland, a key Japanese spy who many observers feel was fundamental to the success of the Mitsubishi and Japanese effort to develop an operational naval air arm with which they obviously attacked Pearl Harbor. This places Yasuki Ono at the very epicenter of the financial machinations, the sub rosa but consummately powerful with a capital C and the capital P, international financial networks that not only finance Japanese fascism, they did the same thing with German fascism, and they're doing the same thing here now. But this places Yasuki Ono at the very epicenter of this system. And that system, in turn, was inextricably linked with Japanese espionage. Again, Yoko Ono's father was the paymaster, the Japanese naval intelligence paymaster in San Francisco for a key Japanese spy in 1933. So this places Yoko Ono herself not only in the profound corporate, transnational corporate landscape that finance, again, fascism in Japan, fascism in Europe, and is doing the same thing here. But it also places Yasuki Ono and his daughter Yoko at the epicenter of an international espionage network that is heavily overlapped with and derived from that financial axis. John Foster and Alan Dulles, they were the key operatives for the Sullivan and Cromwell Bank. Alan Dulles inextricably linked with U.S. intelligence, the director of the CIA, fired by JFK, then served on the Warren Commission that covered up his assassination. And Yoko Ono herself was at the very epicenter of that nexus. So her behavior with regard to John Lennon and the fact that she took Lennon, she was a witness to the assassination. She certainly knew, I think we can assume, she knew, as traumatized as she may have been, that the bullets came from the opposite side from which David Chapman was standing. She may not have known who Major Perdomo was, but she certainly had means of finding out. But in any event, if she
interesting. They might have known who Perdomo was because Elliot Mintz, who hopped on a plane that night, said that he had Perdomo's phone number before he left California. And he wasn't a wealthy man at that time. He was couch surfing and hopped on a plane in the middle of the night just on a hunch.
Really? So this is the same Elliot Mintz who was he used to host television rock shows. And
now he's like an agent. Yeah, he's an agent for Paris Hilton. He's Paris Hilton's agent. He was also Paris Jackson. He's currently Paris Jackson, Michael Jackson's daughter's agent. He was also the agent for Gina Rodriguez, by the way, who put together the Stormy Daniels deal. That's another small world thing for you out there.
It is. He also, the world gets smaller still. He also was associated with the late Roy Tuckman, or Roy of Hollywood, who for many years featured these programs on KPFK, late night, the Pacific station in Los Angeles. It's still aired there as well. So yes, it is a small world, and a big shout out to Elliot Mintz. So I did not realize that, but yeah, that is very interesting, and I would say disturbing. And there are other aspects of John Lennon's assassination that are very suspicious. But the fact that not only Yoko Ono had his bullets, had his body cremated, the bullets came from the left side of the body. Chapman was on his right side. But also in the post-assassination period, Yoko Ono, for example, was in Chicago to recommemorate a Shinto temple with Rahm Emanuel, then the mayor of Chicago, the U.S. ambassador to Japan. And Shintoism was the religion, the state religion of fascist/imperial Japan. It was burned down by infuriated Americans, that particular Shinto temple, in the aftermath of the attack on, drum fanfare, Pearl Harbor. And Yoko Ono helped commemorate that. And she also has apparently done very well for herself, marketing Lennon family memorabilia. Again, I don't know a great deal about her. I did not care for her. I don't care for her art. I care even less for her alleged music.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Are there any indications that she received some kind of financial benefit from all this Japanese trust and all this kind of stuff after the death of Lennon?
I don't know of any direct monies that she has made. It certainly would be possible. And, this is not necessarily to condemn her. I mean, she could have been under mind control. She could have just been threatened. They said, listen, Yoko, do the old carrot and stick, there'll be, $100 million. That would be a lot of money, maybe. Well, it's not a bad chunk to change today. There'll be $100 million in a secret Swiss bank account for you if you collaborate. Otherwise, we'll start by killing Sean Lennon. Or maybe we'll do the same to you. I mean, it's very easy to be brave with someone else's situation,
I'll tell you this, though. It does appear that a lot of people are afraid of Yoko Ono. There's a new documentary May Pang did it's called A Lost Week and a Love Story. And in the documentary, they come out hard on Yoko, okay, which you never see anywhere. But when I had her on the show a couple of times, she's still afraid to talk about Yoko. And she said some things, but not really as and other people I've talked to, that guy Seaman, who was the butler, he just got out of prison. He was supposed to be doing some interviews. He's not allowed to say her name, otherwise he goes back to prison. There's a lot of people afraid of Yoko to this day.
Well, that is not something that surprises me. Again, I will only discuss what is on the public record. Right. I never cared for her. My nickname for her was "Oh No, Yoko." I just didn't like her music. I don't like her music. I don't like her art, and I don't generally care for her entire act. She certainly has apparently profited handsomely from the Lennon family memorabilia. Again, I don't I like John Lennon's early music. He was an aficionado of Chuck Berry, whom I love. It dates me, and I'm an old geezer. But I just was not a big fan of John Lennon. But many people were. And, one of the things I find at one level tragic and another infuriating is that people just have not looked into his situation. Mm-hmm. And I think, frankly, any significant investigation of that must necessarily look into Yoko Ono. Had she, in fact, followed in the footsteps of her father and the Yasuda family? Was she, in fact, an operative of the enormous financial access that we've spoken of, albeit in passing, and the overlapping espionage access? I think that is one of the questions that looms very, very large. John Lennon, by the way, at the time of his killing, was working to support the workers in the strike against the Japanese Food Corporation, a powerful firm marketing Japanese food that was basically a corporate peer of the Yasuda Trust, Mitsubishi, Matsui, etc. And that certainly would not have sat well with the colleagues of Yasuki or Isuki Ono. Was Yoko an operative of those same forces, both espionage and corporate? I don't know.
Well, Dave Emory, we are out of time, though. Spitfirelist.com, the Dave Emory Patreon, WFMU, FM, and For the Record podcast. It comes out weekly. In 1 minute, what can you leave us with?
Well, I would like to encourage people to pursue these things at greater length. I sent you, Ed, many links to programs I've done in which I transcribed powerful elements of the Seagrave, the key exit of the Seagrave's work. And the article about Yoko Ono's father is available on my Patreon site. And it's called "What Did Yoko Ono's Father Do in World War II?" And they're also the Spitfirelist.com website features all the programs I've done on the Seagrave's work, a program for the Record 1321 about the assassination of John Lennon. So I would say that people who want to use the relevant source material that I have generated for the better part of half a century might compare it to getting a drink from a fire hose.
Mm. And Dave Emory, too, I noticed that you sell your entire life's collection of radio shows for $65, something in that. Is that true?
That is true, and
Amazing.
there's a new 64-gigabyte flash drive that is being put together, Gabriel, as I speak at the top of each post, at the top of each program description. There is a link that you can order that. It's only $65. It's tax deductible. And perhaps, Ed, the proof that I'm as crazy as my worst critics say, this is my entire life's work, and I get no money from it whatsoever.
Oh, you get no income from this?
None.
Oh.
None. Not from that. I do from the Patreon site.
No, God bless you, my friend. Spitfirelist.com. Dave Emory on Patreon. The podcast is called For the Record. And also, too, you can get the WFMU FM podcast, too, as well. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ed. Thank you.
Good night.